everybody, and welcome to the 12th episode of the Love Bomb Chats. Tonight, I am joined by the always orange Tom Orange, which is very exciting. This is our second time chatting. The first time we chatted was it earlier this year or the end of last year? It had to have been earlier this year, I feel
Yeah,
like.
I think it was this year because I didn't. It had to have been because I didn't read Sunlit Man until December, and
All
I
right.
had finished that.
There we
So,
go.
yeah.
And I still haven't read it. So.
I was going to ask you if you had gotten around to it yet.
Still
Yeah.
haven't read it, but we had our chat because other than Sunlit Man, I read all of the Cosmere last year, and you also read all of the Cosmere last year and Kindred Spirits.
Yeah. What an adventure that was.
Yeah, it was quite a ride. But before we get into it, I want to ask you what I ask at the beginning of all my episodes, which is, what have you been reading that you've been loving lately, or watching that you've been loving lately? What have you been loving lately? What's going on?
Yeah, so I actually have an answer because normally I'm pretty hard on my books, but I just recently finished Pet Sematary by Stephen King.
All right.
And it came out of nowhere, and I absolutely loved it. I thought I would like it. I've really enjoyed pretty much everything I've read from Stephen King so far, and I had narrowed it down. I was either going to read Pet Sematary or The Shining, or 11/22/63.
Yeah.
So I had narrowed it down to those three, and people were like, save The Shining for like winter time because apparently it has more of a winter feel, and then 11/22/63 and Memories of Ice at the same time, which is just two massive books. And so I was like, yeah. And so I was like, okay, I'll give Pet Sematary a try. I thought, knowing like the general premise of it and like kind of some of the spoilers just from movies, and it's just like such a part of pop culture, that I wouldn't enjoy it as much, because that kind of happened to me with Salem's Lot. Knowing like the big twists, I think it like hurt my enjoyment of it. So I thought that maybe the same thing would happen, and then I could not have been more wrong. It's one of my favorite books I've ever read. It was absolutely fantastic. So that I have absolutely loved that.
Love that. Evie's coming in with the real important question here, though. Do you own a non-orange colored shirt, Tom? Like, the people need to know.
I do, unfortunately.
Is it like one white shirt and then everything else is orange? Like,
so actually, so funny enough, I have this exact shirt in like 8 or 9 different colors.
Okay.
And
other
not
than just shades of orange, but
no,
like
they're actually they're actually different colors. And but most of I wear orange quite a bit. Yeah.
I mean, it's become your distinctive thing. I actually think it's great. I realized this about myself when I was looking at my last few videos. I was like, I only wear black, like, for the most part. Like, it's like I'm a 90s goth kid that like never got over it. And I'm like, oh, there are other colors, but I'm just going to stick to this one.
No, it's orange. I don't know. It's one of those funny things. Like, it's always been my favorite color, and I just kind of I leaned into it harder than I think most people, especially adults,
lean into
their favorite color.
I will say my mom's like this. Like, my mom, you can spot her from like a mile away because she is always in color. Like, she will be in like a sea of beige, and she'll be wearing like lime green, and I'm like, yep, there she is. Like, it's just always easy to spot her. But yeah, it's good stuff. Are you completely new to Stephen King, or?
So I read, did I read it in 2022? Maybe. That was my first experience to King, and then this year I kind of got back into it a little bit and have started to read more of it. I really liked. Did I read Cujo first this year? I think it was Cujo, and I was like, oh, this is fantastic, and so it kind of made me want to read it a little bit more. And I want to get to the Dark Tower at some point. But I told myself I wanted to read more of his other work because a lot of it I think has some like loose tie-ins to the Dark Tower. And so I kind of started to push myself to like read it. And then I have just really, like, he's probably already cemented himself in my top 10 favorite authers.
Nice. I love when that happens.
Yeah, in the 5 books that I have read by him, it's just his books are super bingeable. And he gets like the atmosphere of wherever he is, like the town, like it the small town feel. He just it makes me really nostalgic, and just like
he knows how to make a vibe.
Yeah, exactly. And the only other book that I've really felt the same way about is Boy's Life by Robert McCammon, and they get compared a lot. And so those two guys just know how to like set that small town kind of feel, like nobody else I've read. Yeah.
That's awesome. For me this year, that's been Emily Henry. Like,
yeah,
girl knows how to set a small town feel. And I'm like, guys, I know it's contemporary romance and that's not going to work for everybody, but please try her. She's so good. Oh, she's so good. Again, Evie's wanting to know if Orange is actually your last name.
No, it is. It's my stage name. Yeah.
There we go. We want orange jeans, orange sweats, orange everything.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I have some orange pants.
There you go. Like, you could basically be a human creamsicle if you wore them all at the same time, which, like, I think that'd be pretty great. That would be a hilarious Halloween costume for your channel. Just saying. Yes, Derry, I had a phase of this where I told myself I wasn't going to buy black, and then all I bought was olive green. So literally all I have is olive green, black, and then I have like one light colored sweater that I bought a few weeks ago because it was on sale at Target, and I was like, that looks comfortable. And you know what everyone needs during a heat wave? A sweater.
Yeah. Just swaddle yourself in the heat, you know.
Exactly. I mean, yeah, camo wash. It's pretty accurate. I get you though in terms of reading an author and just knowing right away that they're going to be a favorite for you, because that for me has been Cornwell with reading the Warlord Chronicles. I'm like, slaps. I'm like, you and I, same page. Like, it's just so good. I love sitting down and starting a book and just knowing from the onset of the book where you're just like, this book gets me.
I only have a couple authors that I feel that way about. Like the author who wrote The Three Body Problem, I have read a couple of his, so I read a couple of his other things, and it's such a hard thing for me to recommend somebody else to read, because some of his books the ideas are just so out there and wild, and then the writing on top of it is really dry. You have that translation layer also, where it's coming from Chinese, so you have that on top of his already very dry writing with like no character development. And yet every time I sit down and I'm like, oh, I'm gonna read one of his books, it's just fantastic.
Right? I love that. So I have that with a couple of authors. Neil Gaiman's usually that way for me, where I'm like, it's gonna be weird, so I already like it. It's that 90s goth kid thing coming out. I'm like, he wrote my favorite version of death ever. I'm like, Neil, I love Neil. Sanderson, for the most part now, I feel that way too. Like, Sunlit Man has been the exception because I just haven't felt the urge to get back to it. But like, I have found that I have enjoyed aspects of every single trilogy, quartet, whatever you want to call it, in the Cosmere. And Joe Abercrombie and I have a very strong relationship with one another.
I hate to say I have not read any of his stuff yet.
I can't wait for you to read it, because I really think you are going to jive with it. Like,
I think so.
It's so good. It's just so good. Like, I cannot. It's my mission to convert as many people to Abercrombie as possible. Like, it's now what I'm doing is I'm gifting people books, because I'm like, now you own it, so you have to read it. Like, you know? I'm like, it's either going to end up in a Goodwill pile or you're eventually going to read this. So last year we gifted our friends Piranesi. I was like, she's going to love Piranesi. I was like, definitely going to her. And then for her husband, I was like, he's going to love Abercrombie. Like, I know he's going to love Abercrombie. So we gave him The Blade Itself, Hey Shad. And he just finished it last month. They went on vacation, and he just breezed through the whole trilogy, the first trilogy. Awesome. And he's like, oh, it's so good. I was like, yes, a convert. Like, I'm so excited. So now I'm just like, every time we talk to him, I'm like, you want to start the standalones now? Like, I've got them right here on the shelf.
I think I told you this when we talked about the Cosmere, that I do this thing where, like, I know there are books I'm going to like, and I push them off and like wait until I feel like it's like the exact right moment to read them. Like, I've been doing it with Sun Eater. I've known about Sun Eater since like the second book came out.
Oh,
so
wow.
Like, so that's forever ago.
Yeah.
Haven't even read the first one yet.
I haven't read it either. I just bought it.
Okay.
I was trying to find the hardcover for it everywhere, and it was impossible. So I ended up giving my money to Amazon because they had it. But I was like, okay, like, I want the hardcover for my shelves, and I kept hearing people talking about this series named Sun Eater, and I was like, I don't know if it's fantasy or like what is it. And then I think it was in a live stream with I think it might have been Brian, John, and Chris Navo, and they were talking about Sun Eater, and I was like, oh, like I that sounds like something I would possibly like. So yeah, because I think I kept conflating it in my head with Book of the New Sun. Is that what it's called? Yeah. And I was like, there's so many suns in all these titles. Like, it's very confusing. But I'm excited to read it at some point. Like, it's in the never ending TBR queue.
Yeah.
Hey, Slay.
I think I've owned the first one for like years at this point, and it's just sitting there waiting for the day that I finally decide to do it.
Yeah. Here's the thing. I'm a super mood reader. You're like a more regimented reader. If people follow Tom on Instagram, which you should be, he has his whole weeks laid out where like he'll tell you updates percentage wise on every book that he's read. And I'm like, I'm lucky if I decided what book I wanted to read, let alone having it all planned out.
I try to only plan for like a month ahead though. So that's like
still
I know
good.
For some people like that's like not a possibility, but
it's not. Like I think part of it was because my reading was so regimented when I was in academia that now that I have fun reading, I'm like, oh, whatever I feel like reading. And even then, when I'm committed to a TBR and stuff, like I get angsty about it because I'm like, oh, like I actually have to read this now. Yeah, which Josh and I started a book club that's going to be happening on the channel. So now I'm like solidly committed because I've announced it to all these people. I'm like, hey guys, we're reading this book. And I'm like, oh, I actually have to like be on a deadline and read that book. Yeah. Because I'll start a book like if I'm by myself and I'm like, not feeling it right now. I'll get to 20% and I'll come back 5 months later and I'll finish.
That's for me. It's like once I start, it's really hard for me to like even read something else at the same time.
Yeah.
And that's really been a struggle with me for Memories of Ice because
can imagine.
I mean, it's like I think the audiobook is 44 hours. And so like I mean it's a monster book. And then it's super dense too. So like on top of like it just being super long, it's super dense. And I think, I don't know, I've been trying to like focus solely on it for like 2 weeks, and every time I'm like, it feels like I haven't made any progress, and I just spent like 3 hours on this thing.
I am like this right now with 2 books that I'm reading, and I'm like, what is happening right now? Like, I don't know if I'm just in an awkward reading time where I'm like, this isn't really what my mood is wanting, but I'm simultaneously like, am I just not liking these books?
Yeah.
Which for me, like I've had a really phenomenal year with reading. I've DNF'd a couple of books, which like for the first time ever, I'm a historic non-DNF'er.
Yeah.
And even still, like I'm so reluctant to DNF a book because I'm like, what if it gets good?
What if the ending's fantastic?
If the ending's amazing? And what if like, especially if it's a book one, I'm like, oh, but like, you got to give it its breathing room and all that kind of stuff. So, I mean, I've had a really great year for reading. So I don't know if it's just that like I'm finally hitting a time where it's like things aren't jiving for me. And I'm like, maybe I'm just not in the right mood. This is the problem with being a mood reader. I'm like, got to get it together.
The worst part is I have been enjoying Memories of Ice. It's just so much that it's it almost feels like a slog, even though I am enjoying it. It's like, I want to read it. I'm like actively like, ooh, I want to read it, but it also feels like it's one of those books where I want to give it the appropriate attention. It's not like I can have something else happening at the same time. I need to be like, because you'll miss so much in like a 5 seconds in that book, and you feel like you're completely lost again.
I have been saying this for months because Tori from Tori Talks wrote a book that I have really wanted to read, and I have not been in the mental headspace that I can like give a book as much attention as I want. And I'm like, I want her book to have my sole focus and attention. So like, I get that completely where you're like, there's certain books that you're just like, can put on and kind of have listening and doing other things and everything else. And there's other books that you're like, no, I need to live that.
Exactly.
Exactly. BookTube can make accountability to read an issue. Definitely agree, Derry. This is a thing for me. My reading has astronomically taken off as to like how much I read per year because of BookTube. And sometimes I think that can be a really good thing, but other times it can be a little detrimental depending on how we're tackling that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I can definitely, because it is a little bit of a motivation, especially once you have like a channel. You're like, oh no, I said I'm going to do this, that little bit of accountability. And then at the same time, it's like, if you're not feeling it, that one, that hurts.
It's so bad too, because like if you have people that are part of your community that really love that book and have been encouraging you to read it, and you're like, oh, didn't love it, sorry.
Yeah, well that's the Malazan in general. That community is like, people who love those are like diehard fans, and people speak so highly of them. And like, I really liked book 1, and book 2 was fine. Like, I thought it was good, but there was so much of that book that was really boring and like just was not like, I have a friend who I talked to, and he's read almost every single thing that's in Malazan, like all of it, like all the side stuff. Like he has this like list of like 50 books or something that he's like making his way through, and he's only got a couple things left. And I was talking to him, and he's like, yeah, that book is just kind of like that. And I was like, okay. And then we got to the ending of it, and it's like one of the wildest endings I've ever read. And so it was like, okay, it kind of balanced out.
I keep being told by people there's no middle ground with Malazan. They're like, oh, Laura, you're going to hate it. And then other people are like, I think you're probably going to like it. And I'm like, guys, I have no idea, because I have no idea what that series is even about. Like, I don't know. I am going to go in blind and just hope for the best.
That's exactly. I knew like one character's name out of the whole series.
I know none,
and that was it. Like, yeah, that is all I knew. I went in completely blind, and I think I'm I'm like halfway through Memories of Ice now, and I think maybe I kind of know what the main plot of the series is going to be, and I'm still not even 100% sure I'm right.
Yeah, so, I don't know if that. So here's one of the things that BookTube has kind of enlightened me to, is to my reading tastes and preferences, because I've encountered all these new authors and new stories that I didn't have previously, and so many of them are plot driven, and then a few of them are much more character focused. And I think I've come to realize in the last few years I'm more of a character reader than I am a plot reader, which is why I really like Abercrombie. And it's funny because the first Law trilogy, which is his first one, is really meandery, and that like he's kind of just like, trust me, guys. And I was like, I trust you. Take me wherever you want. And then his second trilogy, Age of Madness, is much more directional, and I didn't like it as much. So I'm like, maybe I'm good with this, like, things not always being 100% explained. So maybe I will do okay with Malazan, because people are like, do not expect to know things.
Definitely. No. I mean, I feel like sometimes he'll even explain exactly what's happening in a scene, and I'm still like, I don't know if I trust you. Like, I'm not sure. I feel like this game, it's a game, and I don't know if I can trust what's actually, like, I know you just said that's what that is, but I'm not sure.
Real sneaky. Yeah. I don't know. I don't know if you feel this way too. After reading as much Sanderson as I did last year, I feel like I'm always looking for clues, where I'm like, oh, there's got to be like a ton of hidden things in the text here, and I'm going to try to find all of them. And in reality, most authors aren't writing like that.
Well, and I think with Malazan in particular, I think a lot of it is, there's no way you could even get it without knowing things that happen in the future.
Sure.
I've heard that like this series is like impeccable on a reread. Like, people say that about Wheel of Time, and I love Wheel of Time. I know you're not the biggest fan, but like Wheel of Time is probably my favorite fantasy series. And I can only I could only imagine what it would be like to go back and start book 1 again, knowing what happens. And that's what people say the same thing with
I have heard that from Malazan, that people really do love it on a reread. A lot of people say the same thing about the Cosmere too, that you can't pick up on all of the stuff on the first read because it's just impossible to. So a reread, like, and I will say I reread Warbreaker earlier this year, and I was like, oh, interesting, and stuff like that. So I definitely I get that for sure. Like I haven't typically been a rereader. The one series that I've reread multiple times in my life has been Harry Potter, because that for me was always my comfort series. And then I would reread Neil Gaiman as well. I would always read American Gods over and over just because I love it. But this year I've been allowing myself to do rereads, and it's really fun. Like I'm actually enjoying it a lot more than I anticipated, because I think I put up this idea in my brain where I'm like constantly counting, where I'm like, oh, well, it's not a new book. So like, why would you reread something when you can read a new story? And I'm like, well, for one thing, it's really nice knowing that you already are going to like a book.
Yes, that's for sure.
It's so nice to know that. And then secondly, if it is one of these bigger universe books and stories, having the foresight of what happens, looking back on it, is so interesting to see how that groundwork is laid and how you get there. Just like being able to look at the minutia within it, I think is really interesting.
Yeah, with the rereads, my problem has always been I always tell myself, it's like, well, you already know what's going to happen, so like it's not worth going back and rereading it. And funny enough, I've really been like flirting with the idea of doing some rereads.
Nice.
Harry Potter is one of them, and then A Song of Ice and Fire is the other one.
I'm going to be rereading that really soon. Josh and I are going to be reading that one together. He's been pushing me to read that for a while, and I've said it on the channel a few times. These glasses, even though I'm wearing them, I just took them off because my prescription is not good anymore, and I have a scratch in the middle of my lens. I went and I saw my eye doctor this past week, and I'm getting new glasses. So I'm finally going to be able to like actually sit and read a book again, because I've been doing all audiobooks for the last several months, because I was like, my vision's not that great. I'll just listen to audiobooks. I didn't make an appointment, but now it's happening. And we're going to be doing the Song of Ice and Fire reread. Because for us, it's been, well, for me, I haven't read it since 2010, 2011. Like, it's been a long time.
That's what I finished book 5 late in like 2019, I think. But I finished A Game of Thrones when I was still in high school, so it would have been 2013.
Oh wow!
Because I binged a bunch of the series early. It might have been even a little bit earlier, because I think I knew about the Red Wedding before it happened in the show. So like something like that. I had gotten ahead enough for that, and then took some big breaks in reading it. But then me and my girlfriend rewatched the show, or neither of us had ever watched it, so we watched the show.
Oh wow!
That must have been 2 years ago at this point. And it made me want to like go back and read it.
Yeah, we're going to be rewatching the show too. This is once again something Josh has like been trying to convince me to do, because I have very strong feelings about the ending, and I'm like, I don't think I can watch that show again. And Josh is like, come on, I think you can. So we're going to see. But Oathbringer is so great, so I'm really excited for you, Shad. Even though you've already read it, I'm excited for you to reread it, because I love Oathbringer. I love it so much.
That's your favorite, right?
Get it together. I love Words of Radiance. It probably edges out Oathbringer by a little bit, but I love that Dalinar is the focus of Oathbringer.
I did too. Yeah,
it's so good. I love Dalinar Kholin so much. He's I don't know, like, it's between him and Adolin for me for Stormlight Archive, because Adolin is like what I imagine a human golden retriever would be like, and I'm like, oh, he's just the best boy. He
is great. It's funny, as I've gotten further away from my Cosmere reads, that like he has stuck with me, Dalinar's really stuck with me, Shallan has really stuck with me. Funny enough, Kaladin, there's like some moments that like, it's just moments though, like his whole everything that's happening with him, it's way less than some of the other ones.
So. Excellent. Welcome to Student Thinking. Kaladin is mid.
I think it's got to be because of Rhythm of War. So that's my thought. Have you thought of rereading those for?
I have actually.
For book 5.
Talk about long audiobooks. The longest audiobook I've ever listened to was Rhythm of War. Like, it was so funny to me, because when I got the books, I was like, oh, Rhythm of War looks shorter than Oathbringer. It's longer.
It's
I was
long.
like,
It
how
does.
did this
Yeah.
happen? Like,
They
how
must
does
have
this
used
happen?
different like paper or something. Because
Yeah,
I think
it's
you're
really
right. Like
weird.
it,
It
it
is.
doesn't look bigger.
Well, I looked at it and the page number is less.
Oh.
And I was like, oh, well, this will be great. And then I was talking to Kyle from Read by Kyle, and he's like, oh no, it's
Yeah.
longer. And I was like, oh, well, there you go.
So funny enough, I have a friend who she started Stormlight before me, and I read all of the Cosmere and caught up to her and passed her by the time she finished
Nice.
all of Stormlight. But when she was reading Rhythm of War, she would like be messaging me, and she's like, "I think this is gonna kill me." She did not have a good time with Rhythm of War, but she was like, "I think this book might kill me."
I enjoyed all of them.
I did too. Yeah.
Way of Kings for me was the one I enjoyed the least. I know I'm
Okay.
really in the minority for that, but
Hmm.
would you like Adolin as much if he had the same page time as Dalinar? Yes. For me, I think I would, because I love that Adolin is quirky. Like, dude loves a good coat, which
Yeah.
I really love for Adolin and about Adolin. Like, good for him. But I think what makes him interesting, I don't want to give away spoilers here for people that haven't read Stormlight, is that he's not like everybody else. Like, he's not like everybody else. And I think that's what makes Adolin a really, really fascinating character. And the relationships that he has with the surrounding cast is excellent. And I'm curious to see that be further developed. Would you agree?
Yeah, I think I'd still like him as much. I think that's a good question, because he is quirky. I do kind of wonder if maybe that would like grind on me a little bit.
Maybe.
But I think it's really his interactions with the other characters that make me like him as much as I do. So I think it would still probably be fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Evie, is this not like other girls' situation? It's just like that, Evie.
Yeah.
That's funny. Yeah, they've been messing with the paper. I have a copy of Words of Radiance from 2014, and it's like the longest. Yeah, that's so weird. I don't know why they do this. I also noticed for my OCD brain that the paperbacks aren't the same height for the big ones. Like,
oh, really?
Yeah, they're not the same height.
Oh no.
So I thought this too. This was a big topic of conversation amongst the 2023 class when Tom started showing up on BookTube. I was like, has anyone noticed that Henry Cavill is now wearing exclusively orange and is talking about fantasy books?
Yeah.
Which, like, dude loves fantasy, so
He
I thought it
does.
was possible. But then I was like, oh, well, his name's Tom, so probably not.
Yeah, that's a funny one.
Yeah. Oh man, Rhythm of Snore. Oh, that's unfortunate. I still had a good time with
Yeah, I mean, it's like anytime you like have read all these books and you have to rank them, it's like one of them has to be your least favorite. It doesn't mean like I would read Rhythm of War again before like most books.
Yeah, I mean, the thing for me, and this is sort of getting into Combative's comment here, is that Way of Kings for me it took me a while to get immersed in the story. And I know this isn't everyone's thing, but like Kaladin is not my character. Like I struggle a lot with Kaladin's character. So for me, the whole book being dedicated to him, like that just wasn't going to work for me the way that it works for other people. I'm thrilled that it does work for so many people in that way. But in terms of like character relatability, the book that works for me the most is Oathbringer, because of the connection to Dalinar, because I think his story and arc progression is just so interesting. And also how I went from loathing Shallan in book one to really liking her in book two. I was like, I don't think I've ever had such a 180 on a character. It was very strange.
I have, and it's in Wheel of Time. There's a character who she was legitimately one of my least favorite characters.
Who is it? Is it Nynaeve?
Yeah. She was legitimately one of my least favorite characters, and I could not stand any, like, I hated her so much. And then by the end of the series, she was my second favorite character. Mm-hmm. So like, yeah. And Way of Kings is my second favorite as well. So
yeah, I'm definitely in the minority, and I know that.
I totally get it though, because I remember being about halfway through that book, and I could probably find the messages in a Discord, but I was like, I'm worried because I like planned my year around reading all of these books, and Way of Kings is like not it right now. And that was probably at about, I probably had that until I got about halfway through the book, and then it started to be
Click
to
for
be
you.
better.
Yeah.
But it did take and 50% of Way of Kings is that's a
That's a
commitment.
long commitment. I mean,
Yeah.
that's the thing. Stormlight really, I feel, is Sanderson saying, like, trust me with this and we'll get there. And I'm hoping that Wind and Truth will land in the right way, because like that's gonna make or break it, I think, for a lot of people. Just based on the general consensus to Rhythm of War. Like I said, I enjoyed Rhythm of War, so I'm not super worried, but I know a lot of people, they're like, this is my last chance. And I'm like, all right, I get it. Because they are such commitment reads. The audiobook is how I did the last 2 books. So I get it. And that audiobook for Rhythm of War is like 59 hours, or it's like 56 hours.
It's so really long. Yeah.
It's so long, but I loved it. I ended up getting very used to Michael Kramer by the end of that.
Oh, so it's funny. So like I pretty much own the audiobook. I'm almost exclusively audiobooks. Like if there's not an audiobook, it bumps a book down my TBR.
That's fair. I've become that way a lot of the time.
Yeah, just because my favorite way to read is to walk and listen. So I like to just kind of walk and listen. And so Kate Redding and Michael Kramer do Wheel of Time.
They sure
do. And then they do all of the Cosmere for the most part.
Yeah.
And so I think, is there another book I read that they did? I can't remember. I think there probably is. And so like I have gotten so used to them. It used to be jarring. I would go from them to somebody else and be like, this is a different voice in my head.
I had that too at the end of last year. I was like, oh, like this doesn't sound like the two of them. But I will say, for me, I really preferred them. Let me go back. I didn't like Michael Kramer initially. I found that if I listen to him at least 2 speed, I like him a lot better. Kate Redding just straight up doesn't work for me. I find her voice to be a bit grating. But the big issue is that because I listened to Wheel of Time first, I associate her exclusively as Nynaeve in my brain. And I'm like, Nynaeve and I do not get along. So for me, I was like, this is not working. But I found by the end of it, I was able to kind of disassociate myself from it. So I know when Wind and Truth comes out, like I am going to listen to the audiobook. I'll probably immersion read it, just also because like I find it very awkward to hold a book that big and actually read comfortably. I'm like, doesn't work for me. So
no, if I read physically, like reading a physical book at this point is like, I hate it. Like give me the Kindle. I'd much rather have that. Cause I like to read in bed on my side and just like hold it, like kind of like basically a phone. And so like, I can't imagine trying to read a big Stormlight book sideways.
It's so hard. Yeah. I mean, Tom can take the Stormlight book. I did it with, I read Way of Kings in the big paperback, and then I did the second one on my computer. I got the ebook for it. I don't have a Kindle. Everything is done on my laptop. My poor laptop is constantly running. This thing never gets a break.
Oh wow.
And I then did the audiobook for the last 2, and I was like, I think I'm probably just going to do the audiobook. Like I didn't feel like I missed anything. I will say, for me, starting an audiobook with a book 1 can be difficult sometimes, just because if it's a lot of names and places, like I'm doing Malice right now, and I'm finding that it's so many proper nouns that I'm like, okay, I have to keep kind of going into the ebook and checking, because I'm like, I want to make sure. And like I've asked Josh this one character's name a few times. I'm like, is it this or is it this? Because I can't remember. But I've really grown to love audiobooks, and I didn't like them as of a year ago. So it's been a big improvement in my life.
That's the thing. So it's the reason I started audiobooks is I was trying to read at work during my lunch break. And so during my lunch break, we had a parking deck, and I would walk in the parking deck, and I would be holding a book, trying to walk at the same time. And I was like, I can't keep doing this. I'd read like 5 pages in an hour because I'm constantly like looking around, trying to make sure I'm not going to get hit by a car or anything. And so that's how I made the transition to audiobooks.
I think that's probably a safer thing to keep you alive.
Yeah, probably. Right? Yeah, especially with how people drive in that parking deck sometimes.
I remember, like, this is not book related at all, but I remember as a teenager, there was this statistic that came out that was like, more car accidents happen in parking lots than they do anywhere else. And I was like, really? And then I started paying attention to like how people drive in a parking lot. I'm like, yeah, I can see it.
It's kind of scary. Yeah.
That's funny to me. So are you like, how excited are you for Wind and Truth? Because we're then getting like a really big gap of time before we
So I hate that. The gap I'm not happy about at all.
Yeah.
Especially with how I felt with the Era 2 ending. I'm definitely not happy that it's going to be years and years before he even starts book
Stormlight,
6.
yeah.
Yeah. And it's like, obviously that could change. And I know he normally kind of sticks to his general plan.
Yeah.
But,
he's like you with reading. He plans it out.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's one of those things where I'm really excited for it, but it's not something I'm thinking about all the time because it's so far away. And like, I know it's coming. Like, it's not like I don't know what's going to happen. Like, I know it's coming December 6th or whatever. That audiobook that I've already bought will load into my phone and I'll be able to go at it. And so like, I'm super excited for it, but I don't know. It's not like front of mind for me, really. Yeah.
So would you say in terms of audiobook narrators that Kramer and Redding are your favorites?
Ooh, probably them or Ray Porter.
Okay.
He does the Bobbyverse books, it's a sci-fi series. He's and some other stuff too. Those three are like the ones for me, probably. Yeah.
I'm excited for you to listen to Stephen Pacey. Oh, you gotta put him like First Law for you. Oh, it's gonna slap if you're listening exclusively on.
I always hear how good they are. I also hear the First Law and the Dresden Files are the two audiobooks that I hear people are like, just do the audiobooks because it's a way better experience. I
did the first 2 books of First Law in physical, and I then I listened to this review from Mike's Book Reviews, where he was saying, listen, like, I get that people like to physically read. I cannot recommend enough listening to this book. And I was like, all right, I'll give it a try. Oh my God, just like completely revolutionized my existence. I was like, oh, you can experience a book this way. Like, this is amazing. My brain does not know what to do right now. And it was so phenomenal. Like, he himself is a whole cast of characters. And I feel like
awesome.
There's few people that do that and do it so distinctively well. Like, I've now listened to 7 or 8 books of Pacey's in the First Law universe, and I know immediately which character is speaking just based on the inflection of a voice. I'm like, instantaneously. And it's like, it'll be characters that show up in different books, and I'm like, I know who you are. Like, and I get so excited because you have that foundation with him. Oh, he's fantastic. I love him so much.
Yeah, that's always great. I know that happens a couple times in the Cosmere where if it wasn't for the audio version, you probably wouldn't realize who it is. But because you get the voice, you're like, oh, I know exactly who that is.
I know who that is, guys. I'm clued in. I love that too. It's fun because it helps you kind of pick up on those little clues and stuff. The First Law audiobook and Dresden, there you go. Both amazing. Dresden, I've heard mixed reviews on. I'm not sure if Dresden would really work for me, so I haven't been like itching to get to it.
I'm curious because I really like Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
There you go.
I have heard people say, this is like, it's similar, like it has the same kind of feel and everything.
Yeah.
But I have also heard all of those same like very negative things about it. And I'm like, because at one point it was much higher, like it was going to be like a priority series for me. And then I kind of heard more and more about it. And it was kind of like, there's so much I want to read. I can maybe, push it off for a little bit and maybe get around to it.
I'm so sad, Sam, you didn't like this. I actually really liked the audiobook
I haven't read those ones yet.
For the first Loch Lamora, but I will say it did take me time to settle into it. But if you do Warlord Chronicles, Jonathan Keeble, who does the narration for that, is friggin' incredible. Like, oh my God, it was. Guys, I have been gushing about this series now for a few weeks. Like, please, everyone go read the Warlord Chronicles. I know it came out over 20 years ago, but please
really,
go read it.
I didn't realize it was that old.
Yeah, 96, 97, 98, I think, is when each of them came out.
Okay, because I know it's Saxon Stories. Is that his other? That's like his really long one.
That's the Uhtred books. They just finished a few years ago.
That's what I thought. I thought those had finished more recently because I watched when that
The Last Kingdom?
Yeah, when it was coming on Netflix, I watched the first 2 or 3 seasons and was caught up and then never went back to it.
You saw the best of the best, so you're fine.
Okay, well, yeah. So I've thought about reading those instead of Warlord Chronicles just because I liked the show at the time, and then it was one of those, I don't know if I want to commit to another 13, long book series.
Yes, Last Kingdom season 1 and 2 are the best. We quote regularly from those in our house.
Okay. Yeah.
We are big fans of that. But I've read book 1 of the Saxon Chronicles, which is titled The Last Kingdom, and then I read these 3, and I think that there is no comparison in the quality of the writing. Like Warlord Chronicles is just a 10 out of 10, whereas Saxon Chronicles, I would put it like a 7 out of 10. Okay. I feel like it probably gets better as the story progresses, just based on what I've heard people say. And like my husband read the whole series. But I did hear people say as well that they found it got a little repetitive as it went on. But because Warlord Chronicles is 3 books, like it really doesn't have much opportunity to be repetitive. The only time it is when the main character tells you, like, I'm writing this as a retrospective of my life. And like he reiterates that at least in each book. So you get that over and over, but like that's it. I mean, it's just so good.
So if I don't care about like the King Arthur legend whatsoever, like I don't have any interest in it, have never cared about it whatsoever, are they still worth reading? Or
they are still worth reading. Okay. The thing that I love about this is that it's not from the perspective of Arthur. It's from the perspective of this guy named Derval, which is like the most hilarious name ever. I love it so much. But Derval is he becomes a warrior for Arthur. And like it touches upon the traditional aspects of the Arthurian lore to a point. Like you have some of the main characters, but he also introduces people that aren't in the main plot of that story, which I really like. Particularly one character, and she's like phenomenal. I love her so very much. And he kind of flips it on his head as to who villains are in this story. And that's the other thing. Like he writes phenomenal villains. Like you hate them.
That's always nice.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like I love a well-crafted villain. Like if it's someone that I can point to on the page and be like, like I get so mad. I'm like, author's done his job. It's like when you watch a movie and you walk out of there and you're like, that guy.
Oh yeah.
That guy. But simultaneously you're saying like, they did a really good job.
yeah, exactly. Like I know that actor who does Joffrey gets that a lot. Like everyone's like,
it's why he quit acting. That poor guy.
I know, right? Yeah, everyone's like, God, I hate you, but great job,
I know, that's the thing. Like if you hate them so much, you know that they've really done a good job. And I feel like Cornwell does a really excellent job of rooting you in the time period, giving you historically what was going on while simultaneously just imbuing the world with magic in this way that feels foreign and mysterious yet accessible. It's just perfect. Like honestly, it's one of those books. Like I actually finished the series and I went onto his website that night and I wrote him. I was like, thank you for writing these books because like they are friggin' incredible. Like I cannot say how much I love these books and the world you've created, and just it brought me into like I would read 30 more books in this series if you were willing to write them. But at the same time too, it's one of those few trilogies where I'm like, oh, the ending's perfect. Like it doesn't need to be anything else.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's great. If it's not clear, really big fan.
It's funny. I've heard, I watch your videos and everything, and I've heard you just like be gushing about it constantly.
Yeah. I feel like people are getting real sick of this content.
No.
But simultaneously, I'm like, how many of these videos can I get away with of telling people to just go read these books?
Just go read it, yeah.
Yeah, I'm like, we're not there yet, but we're pretty close.
But it's special when a book like hits you that way. Like,
oh yeah,
that's not something that happens at least, I know some people like it feels like they love every single thing that they read to like that kind of level. Yeah. That's definitely not for me. No. So like when that happens, it's like.
Yeah, I usually, if I'm lucky, I'll get like maybe 5 books like that a year, depending on how many I've read that year. Last year, I definitely had that feeling when I read First Law, because I was just like, oh, this, Abercrombie gets me.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, this is gonna be one for me that really resounds, and it did, and I still love it. I would argue that he's now my favorite author. I love him so much, and of course there were Stormlight books and Sanderson books in general that I was like flying high. But this year it's definitely gonna be Enemy of God, which is book 2 in this trilogy, but like the whole trilogy is just amazing.
Yeah, this year I'm pretty happy. Like halfway through the year, I have 2 5 stars. Yeah. And so like that's like a good pace for me normally, because there have been years where I don't have any.
Yeah. So I know, Evie, and I hope that no one ever tells you to. I will read that eventually, I promise. But I'm trying to think, like I've had a few 5 stars this year. When I was thriving in my romantasy era at the beginning of the year, I definitely had a few 5 stars. And like, honestly, I've been itching to get back to it a little bit. I'm like, I could read some more romantasy now. Yeah. But I just feel like it's rare when you find, like you said, that book that you're just like, because this is already a series that I want to reread. I'm like, I just want to reread this. Yeah. It's so good.
Yeah, so for me, it's been Pet Sematary is one, and then All the Pretty Horses by Cormac McCarthy was the other one that I just.
You guys are this like.
So I've read, I think it's 5-ish books by him, and he has written one of my favorite books, and then like 2 of my least favorite books I've ever read in my life. So like it's not like a him thing in particular. It's So he's run it the gambit for me. Because he has some like 3-star books for me. The Road, I think, is a 4-star book, and then there's like a couple 2-star where I was just like, I did not like. And it's maybe if I reread them, I'd like get what he's going for.
Right.
But at the time, I didn't, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah, I've been trying to push myself this year a little bit with picking up new authors and maybe trying a couple of new genres and stuff, or like subgenres and things. And I read David Mitchell this year.
Okay.
And as I was reading The Bone Clocks, I remember I sat there and I was like, what the ever-loving God am I reading? Like, this was a perfect time to enter the chat, Joanna, because I buddy read it with Joanna. And I was messaging her and I was like, what book is this? Like, what on earth did we pick up? Like, explain this to me, because I was so confused, because it's a really genre bending book, and I've come to realize that for my brain I need things to be like labeled properly. So I have a clear understanding, and like the first third of that book I was like, don't know what's going on here. And then I got to this one POV, Crispin Hershey, and I was like, I'm in. Like, I'm so in. This guy is so well written. And by the end of that book, I was like, this was a great read. Like, one of my favorite reads ever? No, but like definitely very interesting in what he did. And I don't think it's something that I would have read like a year ago, and definitely not 2 years ago. Happy I read it for sure. And like, it's just, The Bone Clocks was a very emotional ride. It is a timeline book where we start in the 1980s. Am I right, Joanna, that it's the 80s? And we jump, I think, up until like 2045 or 2050, around there. And it's 5 different POVs throughout the course of time, and they all intersect with this one character who's the initial POV.
Okay, interesting.
And 1980s to start. Perfect. And it was so well researched and so well crafted that I was like, he gets points automatically for that. And then I just found myself being more and more pulled into the story, that now I want to read Cloud Atlas, which is the book he's most known for, like Brian was saying here. But I wouldn't have read that a year ago.
It's funny, because even for myself, I have definitely like expanded what I'm willing to read, and what I think what I'm even able to enjoy. Especially this year, I've really kind of forced myself to read some older sci-fi, because in my experience, sci-fi is like, if I love it, it's like a super high up book for me, but a lot of it I just don't end up enjoying. So it's like this weird, like there's no middle ground. It's either like super high up for me or not good. And some of that older sci-fi, some of the ideas and just weirdness it plays with.
For sure. Joanna, actually, I'm pulling up your last comment, Joanna, so I'm highlighting you. I think that book is called Snow Crash.
By
And
Neil Stevenson, I think.
yeah, she just read that. She's been encouraging me to read it. I just it hasn't come for me yet, but she had really interesting things to say about it for like an older sci-fi book and like how it kind of resonates now and stuff. So it's really interesting to see how those ideas were written a couple of decades ago and now how they've aged in that way. Yeah,
absolutely. I read one this year. I think it was it's called a Time of Changes. I think it was written in like this early 70s, like it maybe was published in 71 or something. And it just had some like wild ideas about like society, like it's on a completely different planet, and so it has a society that has like a completely different societal structure. And then it has to do the whole premise of the book is like the individual like shouldn't exist. So like the use of I is like the worst thing somebody can say in this world, and you basically follow somebody who like goes on this journey of like self exploration. And I don't know, it was such a weird book, but also for somebody to be exploring that idea at that time was just I mean, I ended up really liking that book.
That's awesome.
But if I had read that 2 years ago, no way, I would have been like, what is this,
right? Like real strange. I feel like I was more into reading classics as a younger reader. Like I picked up, I think, Great Gatsby when I was like 11 or 12, and I was like, this is great. Like I really liked this, and then just stopped because I got into fantasy more and was like, yeah, this is more my speed. But then was talking to Jimmy a little while ago, and he was like, I've recommended Alan 2 books, and they've both been 5-star reads. And I was like, oh, what are they? And one of them was Remains of the Day, and I was like, I'll look into it. Not a book I normally would have read. I enjoyed reading it. I don't know if like people are familiar with The Remains of the Day. It's a very popular book, but like I was riddled with anxiety while reading that book because that dude has zero chill, like zero chill. And it's such an interesting experience to read short books, because in the fantasy sphere, we're so used to picking up a book that's a minimum of like 500 to 600 pages. And you're like, okay, I'm going to be here for a hot minute. And being in our world and dealing with problems that, you know, humans dealt with during a specific time period and stuff, like it's so interesting. And like I kind of forgot what reading like that was like, and I was like, oh, this is a unique experience that I haven't had in a while.
That's the great thing about BookTube, is like getting all these recommendations for stuff that I would have never have heard of, like whatsoever. And then, you know, especially when those turn out to be something I really like. Like that's always so awesome.
For sure. Joanna, you are going to love The Remains of the Day. And then we can talk about how Stevens is the worst person to take a vacation with of all time. So what do you feel like for the second half of the year you're really gearing up to want to read? Because if you're planning things out, I know you've probably got like a list of things.
So it just released, but there's a new book by Will White, the author of Cradle. He has another series called The Last Horizon. The third book in that just released, so I'm really excited to read that. James S.A. Corey has their new book coming out. What, Mercy of the Gods or something like that. Something like that. Super excited for that. Really,
is it going to be sci-fi or fantasy?
Yeah, I think it's more sci-fi. I think it's if I remember correctly, it's like humanity's on a planet, they don't remember how they got there or something like that. I can't remember exactly. I just I saw a new book by them. I was like, yep, that's going to be on
there. Add the cart,
yeah. And then I need to look again, because I'm sure there's more books that have been announced that I'm not like up to date on. The third book in the Bloodsworn saga, so that's John Gwynn's the third book in that trilogy. I think it's just going to be super excited for that one. And then Stormlight. Those are like the 4 that I know of off the top of my head right now.
Have you read
and there's a new Bobbyverse book coming, which is another sci-fi book, and I love that series. It's a lot of fun. So I think the 5th one of that is supposed to come out in September. So those are like the 5 that I'm like most excited for.
You've got a few coming out then, which is always exciting. Have you read Malice?
No.
Okay,
Not,
so you've
I
read
own.
Bloodborne, but not.
Yeah, I own them all. I want to read them, but I just haven't done it yet. But yeah,
Gotcha.
Bloodsworn, I really like those books. So
yeah, I know nothing about them other than apparently they have like Viking Norse inspiration.
Yep.
I'm like, I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're cool because it's not like something I've read a lot of, like that kind of mythos and stuff. So it's not something I'm like super familiar with. And so him explaining some of that, and the magic's pretty cool in it. So I've enjoyed that a lot.
Yeah, I love a good god magic influence.
Yeah.
That for me is always a good selling point. If that's listed, I'm like, yeah, I'll probably read it.
Yeah. I know. So is your master's degree in like religion or is it just history? I can't remember exactly.
So it's ancient history, but my thesis is a religion.
Okay.
It's on a religion.
That's
it's on
what.
a
Okay.
specific goddess. But I did a double major of religion and history for my undergrad.
Gotcha. Okay, I knew it was something like that. So yeah, you went full bore with it. I got a minor in religion, so
there
like
you go.
I got like just a little taste of it. So like that same kind of thing is like anytime a story is like the gods are coming back, or we don't know why the gods are gone and all, or how they die, anything like that. I'm always like, yo, I'm totally
yeah. I'm like,
in for that.
I will read that.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
So if you did a religion minor, did you have to still sort of specialize within that and take like more classes in one religion than another?
No. So funny enough, it was, so I think if I remember correctly, I had to take one specific philosophy class. And it was basically American philosophy. So we talked about like early like Puritans all the way through to like more modern day stuff of like, but it was specifically mostly American philosophy. I took some classes that were more specific to Christianity, and then there was a Buddhism class I took, a Taoism class, some more Eastern religions as well. So it was a nice little mix.
A good little mix.
Yeah.
What is the best religion? My favorite religion is probably Zoroastrianism. If I had to pick one, I'm probably going with Zoroastrianism because it is the origin point of having religion that definitively has good and evil attributed to light and dark, which I find very interesting. And it was pretty much the inspiration for most monotheistic faith. So I like that. When are you guys reading Dandelion Dynasty? Is that on your list?
Oh, absolutely. That's another one of those series that I've known about for a super long time.
Yeah.
Because he translated the Three Body Problem.
Yes, he did.
So I've known about Ken Liu for like a super long time, and then I've just kind of been holding off on reading Dandelion Dynasty because it's another one of those, like, it seems like a pretty in-depth series with a lot going on that I didn't want to. I'm already reading Wars of Light and Shadow by Janie Wirtz at the same time as I'm reading Malazan. I want to
start Janie Wirtz. I haven't read anything by her yet, and I'm looking to start her.
She's a wizard. She's absolutely fantastic.
I don't know if you could have a better compliment for a fantasy writer. She's a wizard.
I mean, she is just like, her writing is like on a whole other plane of existence compared to like anything else I've read. And I'm not normally somebody who like gets blown away by writing. Like English is not my strong suit. Like literature, like all that in school, not my forte. But like reading Janie Wirtz makes me realize like how bad I am at the English language. Like she has ascended to a plane that I didn't know existed, and I mean, it's fantastic. I really enjoyed the first book. I liked it. I thought it was good, and then the second and third book like really took off for me. Yeah.
That's awesome. Josh and I made a list of 12 books, I want to say, for possible book club books. And book one of Dandelion Dynasty, Grace of Kings, is on that list.
Oh, nice.
So I'm hoping to get to it at some point within the year. I might just jump the queue and like read it at some point, and then we'll put another book on the list. But yeah,
I saw the purple edition that they're making of Dandelion, and I was like, ooh.
I was really tempted. I was so tempted, but I was like, but I haven't read them. So
same thing, exactly.
Evie, I'm super down to do this. Let me know when, and we can do that because I'll listen to that. So that's easy enough for me. But I just feel like I haven't read a lot of Eastern inspired fantasy. Like, it's just not one that I have read a lot of yet. So I'm looking to do a bit more of that in the next couple years. And obviously Ken Liu is like that. And then Sword of Kaigen I want to read at some point. So
have you read Greenbone Saga?
I haven't yet. No.
Okay. So that would maybe be another one.
Yeah, I'm a little not certain if that will be for me, just in terms of, I do tend to struggle a little bit more with urban fantasy. I will say my experience with urban fantasy is limited. Like, it's really limited. But the books that I have read have taken me a little while to get into. The only one that I would say is the exception to that rule is American Gods. Okay. And that's just because it's Neil Gaiman. I'm like, Neil could write stuff on the back of a cardboard box and I would be like, it's perfection. I'm totally biased with Neil, but I feel like I will try it. But I hate The Godfather, and people trying to sell it to me as The Godfather. I'm like, wow, not a good mix.
Do you hate them? Do you hate the movie or the book or both?
I have not read the book. Okay. The movie.
Okay. I haven't. I've read the book. I haven't watched the movie. I've never seen the movie.
So I love gangster films in general, and like I grew up watching The Sopranos, and people were like, "Oh, you're gonna love The Godfather," and I sat down and I was like, "No, it's just not for me." And I know a lot of people love it. Obviously, like, it's a classic. People really, really love those films. But I am curious just in terms of the magic system, and I know that people praise fondly just in terms of her storytelling and her character work. So I do plan on giving it a try. And we'll see where I land.
That's one of the ones that I just I have some interest in it, but it's not like I hear people talk about it and everybody seems to really enjoy it. And then for whatever reason, I never end up moving it up my list.
I know. It's one of those things where I'm just like, oh yeah, I'll get to it.
I read, she had a short story come out last year.
Yeah.
Untethered
it was not
Sky.
well received.
Yeah, I read it and I mean, like, I thought it was fine. But it's not like,
I know notoriously does not love that series, or at least the first book. I don't think she ended up reading beyond book one.
But like I read that short story and it was like, it didn't make me want to read anything else more. It didn't it wasn't like super negative feeling towards it, but it definitely didn't like increase how I felt about like wanting to read anything else.
Which, it's so interesting, right? Like when you're talking about Cormac McCarthy before, where it's like he has some of your favorite books that you've read and also some of the worst favorite books that you read. Like giving authors a second chance can be a really interesting experience. Also, reading things out of order for them is something that I've learned that's really, really interesting. Like, to go back to my contemporary romance era, so Abby Jimenez is an author that I read this year, and I read her newer trilogy, and I thought it was excellent. And then I was like, well, if this is like the type of author she is, I'm going to like most of her work. Went back and read an earlier book, and I was like, absolutely not. Like, this is so awful. And it was funny because like I loved the newer stuff, and I was like, this is a very good example of like, had I read her earlier material, of giving an author a second chance and just seeing how they evolve as an author, and being able to connect to that in a more meaningful way. So yeah, I definitely do think it's interesting when we kind of go back to that well more than one time.
And I mean, I it is interesting because obviously you hope an author improves, right? Like as they write more and more. But that's not always the case too. So like sometimes you'll like read stuff out of order and be like, man, that thing you wrote 15 years ago is way better.
I know. Isn't that so unfortunate? You're like, So what would you say are the like big booktube darling series / books that you haven't got to yet that you're excited to get to? Other than First Law, because like that's gotta happen.
Yeah, no, First Law is definitely up there. The big ones. So Sun Eater's super popular right now. So like that one's pretty obvious. Realm of the Elderlings.
I haven't read it either. I'm so sorry, Gary.
I haven't it was between that and Malazan this year. I was going to read one of those two. Fair. And the stash is nice. Yeah.
That should be your slogan, Tom Orange. The stash is nice. And also books.
I grew it. Fun fact. I grew it as a joke to mess with my girlfriend. I had grown out my facial hair a little bit. and shaved just the mustache. Was like, there's no way she's gonna like approve of this. And then I could not have been more wrong. And so now I've had a mustache.
Now you're stuck with it.
Now I'm stuck with it. Yeah. Yep. What's another really popular one right now? Dungeon Crawler. What is it? Dungeon Crawler Carl.
Oh,
is
yeah.
a super popular one.
Ryan's in the chat here somewhere. I'm sure he will.
Oh yeah. I know that's right up his alley. Those are like the ones that come to my mind, right off the bat, because like I know Wheel of Time doesn't get the same love that it used to.
I still feel like it does.
Maybe I've just consumed all of that content already because I love the Wheel of Time. So I'm a little.
Every time I see a top 10, I'm like, I know it's gonna be there.
Yeah, it does still make its way onto the to the top 10s and everything.
I'll take the free Audible, Brian, for that if you're sending them out to people.
So like, yeah, I'm doing Malazan right now, which I feel like is the other like huge one that everybody, feels like you need to read, and it's like a transcendent experience as you get through it. So those are the couple that like I can think of off the top of my head that, I need to get to still.
Sure. I feel that way about Rama the Elderlings and Malazan. I'm like, eventually I'm going to have to try these. Yeah. I mean, I've said it before and I'll say it again. Like, I have nothing against Robin Hobb. It's not like that I haven't started her for that reason. I am so nervous with the animal content in those books because people know this if they've been around. Like, I don't do well with any animal stuff. I'm like, if someone, it could be a mouse to a dragon. I'm like, if there's harm coming, I will be very upset. Like if people watched House of the Dragon this past week, I knew what was coming. I knew. And I was more upset about the dog. Like I was very concerned what was going to happen to that dog because I was too.
I wasn't sure. I was like, what? What's going to happen? There's no way that,
I was like, I'm not feeling good here. Feeling good. Yeah. So, I struggle with that kind of stuff. And I know that it's like, it's going to be part of the story for Rama the Elderlings. And I know that a lot of people have said that the way that she handles it is not gratuitous or anything like that. And it's helped a lot of people deal with grief and stuff. But I'm just like,
Sometimes if it's, if it's one of those things that, like everyone has those things that they like are sensitive towards. And,
that's my thing. Like, that's my thing. It's
sometimes it's hard to use, no matter what, no matter how well it's done, no matter how, if it's super tasteful or can help you, or, people feel, relief from it. Or sometimes it's just one of those things that it just doesn't. Doesn't work.
When we used to watch Game of Thrones, when it was airing regularly, my poor husband had to sit through all of this stuff with me, but like people would be murdered left, right, and center. I was like, it's fine. The second one of the dire wolves was in danger, I was like panicking and pacing around the room. Even though I knew certain things about the books, I was like,
doesn't make it better.
Does not make it better. And then with dragons and stuff, like again, every time something happened was in pure panic mode. When it came to the Battle of Winterfell, I about had a heart attack when I saw Ghost in like the lineup. Yeah. Oh my God. We were watching it with our neighbors and I was just like this. I was like, why is Ghost in the line? Are they going to pull back Ghost? What is he doing? Why is Ghost there? Like, I just couldn't calm down. So Realm of the Elderlings and I are going to be in for a wild ride.
Yeah. And then I think there's some authors that like, I haven't read any of Guy Gavriel K yet. So like, I feel like that's like a huge blind spot still.
You're going to like GGK. I think obviously I haven't read Cormac McCarthy, but I feel like all of my friends who like Cormac McCarthy also really love GGK. Okay. Because GGK just has such beautiful prose and language. And I feel like McCarthy is described in a similar way that like the language he uses is really evocative. And I feel like GGK does that in a way that not many authors do.
Yeah, I have always heard that about him. So just another one of those ones that for some reason I've pushed. Yeah, keep pushing it off, and for no real reason other than I just haven't.
Honestly, I don't think I would have read him as soon as I did if my husband hadn't read his books, and it was because I do this thing annually that I used to do it, but before I joined BookTube, I joined this massive fantasy group on Facebook. And before Christmas, I went on in like November and was like, hey, I'm looking to buy a bunch of books for my husband. I'm looking for either standalones or book ones. These are the type of fantasy books / sci-fi books that he's liked. What would you recommend to me? I haven't been in the space for like 10 years.
Sure.
And GGK Lions of Alrasan was probably the number one recommended thing based on his reading taste. So I picked it up immediately. I was like, great, this sounds good. And I was like, plus he's a Canadian author, like great. You know, I was like, fine, I love this. And Josh read it and was like, it's my second favorite book of all time. Like, I love it. And I was like, great. So because he liked it so much, he's like, you really need to read this book. And the pressure started mounting. And then once again, Joanna here was like, I'm going to be reading Lions. And I was like, perfect. We can read it together. Yeah. McCarthy's prose is very different than GGK, though. I would completely agree with that based on what I've heard. I just think that they're both known for having very strong prose. Correct me if I'm wrong, though, Joanna. But loved Lions so much. Like, it was such a phenomenal read. The prologue of that book is incredible all the way to the ending. Like, it's a stellar read from start to finish. So highly recommend.
Yeah, that's another one that at some point, you know, I've got, it feels like such a blind spot to not, just like for the longest time, Sanderson was my blind spot until last year. Like, I just had put it off. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so it was just like one of those things that it needs to happen.
Yeah, there's no pressure like someone you love wanting you to read something they love. This is the story of my marriage, because I read a lot faster than my husband, and I'm like, hey, I really need to read this book.
Yeah.
And I've been pestering him to read a few books that I love that he hasn't gotten to yet. Specifically, I really want him to read Piranesi, Augustus, and Circe. Like, those are my top three that I'm like, please read these books.
Oh, Circe.
Did you not like Circe?
Oh, it's one of my least favorite books I've ever read in my entire life.
I love it so much. You and Alan would get along really well with that.
I know it's like the hot take, but yeah, that is.
I don't know if it is, honestly. Like, I feel
maybe not.
It might not be. I think that historically more people tend to like Song of Achilles than Circe.
Okay, yeah.
But I know that there are quite a few people on BookTube that do not like Circe, specifically Alan. So
that's why I've heard Alan rant about a lot of books. I don't know if I've heard him rant about Circe. I know.
If you want him to like, so we did. Evie organized this really fun thing for New Year's where we did Taskmaster, and one of the tasks that we had to do was create a poem based on books that we had, and I specifically chose Circe because I knew he would hate it. I was like, I am using the opening line of Circe. Here we go. Yeah, it's just not a favorite of his.
No, I know Matt from Matt's Fantasy Book Reviews also hated Circe. Like, it was funny. Him watching his review of it was like, oh, that's just me talking. Like, we felt like the exact same way about that book. So yeah.
See, Derry and I can share this love for Circe. It's fine. But yeah, that's the thing. Like, one of the things that I really like about our corner of BookTube anyway, like, I'm not going to say that this is a thing for all of BookTube, is that I have found that content creators can talk to each other and not like the same books and still talk to each other. Which is really nice.
Yeah. I mean, I never go into a book being like, I'm so excited to read this, I'm going to hate it. Like, I just can't wait to be super negative about this book. Right. Like, I want to read I want to read things that I like, and I want to like it. Like, I want to love everything. I know that's like not a realistic thing, but like, that's the goal. Like, I'm not here to.
Yeah, I feel that way too, and I think that's in part because I am such a mood reader that I'm like, I'm picking this up, but I think what would be a good time for me to love this book.
Yeah.
So you want to have that stellar read and feel when you pick it up and you get to the end. Sometimes it's just not. It's gonna be missed.
Yeah, no, like, there's still one book, what is it, Gates of Fire or something. It's about the Battle of Thermopylae and everything, and it's like, I thought I was gonna love that book, and I always say that it's like the best book I have ever read that I just don't like. Like, it's so well done. Like, everything about it is fantastic. Like, if somebody came up to me and was like, that's my favorite book ever, I'd be like, I get it. I just didn't like it.
I mean, not for everybody. Sam, I'm real excited for you and your wife. That's all I'm gonna say. I'm real excited. Just go into it with an open mind. Open mind.
Yeah. Like I said, maybe it's not the hottest take anymore, but I do feel like more people end up enjoying it than not with Cersei.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because I started it and DNF'd it the first time because I just finished my master's degree and I was like, I don't want to read anything about ancient history or mythology ever again. Yeah, ever again.
Yeah.
And my friend messaged me. She's like, I really think you're going to love this book. And I did the first like 50 pages and I was like, I've had enough and closed it and was like, I'm good for now. And then last year I was like, maybe now, and inhaled it in 2 to 3 days. I was like, love it. Perfect.
Yeah.
Like 5 stars. Great for me. But that's the thing.
Awesome.
Like,
no.
I get that it's not for everybody.
Yeah. I mean, and that's, like I like, for example, I know you don't enjoy The Wheel of Time. And to me, like, I just don't understand how, everybody doesn't just love this series.
If this wasn't a love bomb, Tom, I could tell you about it for hours.
See, I've got you trapped. You can't talk about it.
I can only talk about the things about Wheel of Time that I deem acceptable. I will say, and I say this regularly about Wheel of Time, that I think Jordan really shines with his world building. Like that, I think is the thing that he does the best, and his lore. And I think the list ends there. But I also feel like...
How far did you get into the series?
3 books, but I know the extent of what happens. Like I know the entirety of the storyline. The thing for me with that is I feel if I had come to that series as my first foray into fantasy or adult fantasy, I would probably feel differently about it than I do. But because I came to it after reading A Song of Ice and Fire, I was like, this to me doesn't compare. Gotcha. And I think that can be said about many series and many authors, that it just depends where on your reading journey they come to you,
Yep.
And our tastes constantly evolve and change, and the way that we relate to characters constantly evolve and change. And I feel like I'm getting to that point now with fantasy where, because I'm in my 30s and I'm now a mother, I'm like, I want to see older protagonists. Like I'm really over the idea that every protagonist is 16. I'm like, I just can't.
I don't need a 17-year-old.
No.
Like, especially if it's one thing if like I know the series, like, so Realm of the Elderlings, I know it's going to start as him, you basically
as a child,
whole life. That I think I can maybe be a little bit more in on. But like if I know a trilogy is like, okay, they're 16 and then at the end of the series they're like 16 and a half.
Yes, exactly.
That might be a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. I completely get that. And that's actually why I love Dalinar Kholin so much, because it's an older...
Seen the world a little bit.
Seen the world, has lived, has had relationships, has had children, has made mistakes. Like he's a nuanced character. He's fleshed out. And I really appreciate that now that I'm a bit older. So I'm finding that like I'm hitting that point in fantasy where I'm like, I need to see us getting more perspectives and more journeys. But I know it's that, like the chosen one has to typically be younger and like all that kind of stuff. And I'm like, I get it. But like, that's why I think had I read Wheel of Time when I was like that age, it probably would have hit differently for me. But like, I was talking to my writers group about this the other day, and that one of the things that's so great about A Song of Ice and Fire is that depending on the stage of life you are, that when you read that series, you relate to different characters. And if you go back and read it as an adult versus reading it as a teenager, you could prefer a whole new cast of characters compared to your first read. Like I remember when I read it the first time, I was like, Sansa is the worst, like the worst. And I was like not digging Catelyn or, like any of that stuff. And I look at it now and I'm like, very different lens, like very, very different lens. And I love that. I think that just goes to show how a story and book can be really nuanced. And I feel like for me, I won't have that experience with like a Wheel of Time type thing. Like that just isn't the same for me, but other people might feel differently. Which is great for them.
Of course. Yeah. Now that is interesting. Speaking of your writing group, I wanted to ask you this. So obviously I know you're working on book 1.
I am.
Have you already started thinking about book 2?
I have.
Okay.
I have the prologues for books 2 and 3 written.
Okay.
Because it's kind of like Stormlight in the sense that the prologue is just one page for each of my books, but it is similar in the way it is structured, but it is from a different POV of a different god per book.
Okay.
So that part is written. I actually spent the day today trying to work on query letters, which is like the worst thing of all time.
I can't even imagine.
I did not realize that writing a book was the easiest part of this process.
Oh man.
It is so, it's so ridiculous to say, but like the exercise of trying to learn how to condense your novel into a paragraph or 2 paragraphs is so difficult. And I'm learning that I am terrible at this exercise. Like I'm so bad at it because I just can't hit the right notes or the right points. And I'm like, guys, I'm struggling here. Like someone guide me. Oh, it's time.
I can't even imagine. So like in college, I had to do some writing for the religion minor, but I majored in computer science.
Oh, okay.
I wrote one paper for my bachelor degree, and that was like my senior project. Yeah,
wow.
one paper at the end of the year. It was like and it wasn't even like a paper. It was like a technical summary, like an article of this program that I had wrote that did something very specific and everything. And that was like the extent of like for my actual degree. So like the thought of like sitting down and like trying to write and tell a story.
Oh man,
no way.
I just recently got an ADD diagnosis, and it came about because of the way that I write. And I didn't realize this because I always assumed ADD was like just not being able to stay on topic and kind of flitting from
kind of all over the place.
Yeah, but there's actually the opposite, which is hyper-focusing. And this is something that I have because I would sit down to write my papers in college for 10 straight hours. Like I just wouldn't move. And like I wouldn't think to eat until someone would show up with food and be like, I think you need sustenance now. And I'd be like, oh yeah, I haven't eaten in 12 hours. Like that's probably a good call. And it was highlighted to me when I wrote this book because I wrote it all in a month. Yeah, like I sat down, I was like, got the idea, here it is, wrote it in a month. And I was telling someone in my writers group, and he's like, have you considered that you have ADD? And I was like, I haven't actually, but now that you mentioned it and I spoke to my doctor about it, she's like, oh, most definitely.
So do you get hyper fixated on like foods and stuff too?
Oh, everything. Like if I find something I love, I'm like, oh, it's now going to be part of my personality. So settle in.
Okay.
Yeah. I also I am an ambivert in that I love to talk to people, but I get fatigued really easily. So I try to find one specific thing that's going to be like our topic. And I'm like, what is this one thing that you and I might both love? Let's talk about this thing for the whole evening. And that might be a food, a book, a show, a character. Like I just try to hone in on a specific thing. But yeah, my brain just I'm learning how my brain works at 34.
It's like that sometimes,
it's interesting how we come to learn these things about ourselves later in life sometimes. Yes, I'll take it, Derry. I'll take it.
Especially the ADD stuff, I think in general, like in women, it's not nearly diagnosed. It's almost like something they completely ignored for women. I don't know if it's still like that. Like, I don't know if kids.
A lot of the time it is. A lot of the time. And it's interesting because I'm a former teacher and I taught in a school for kids with dyslexia. And dyslexia shows up a lot more visibly in men than it does in women because women pull from language from both sides of the brain where men only pull from one. And therefore women can compensate and hide it a lot better. And we would get kids coming in the 5th grade that were mostly male. And then our 10th grade entries would be female. And I was like, oh yeah, like we're getting here. And ADD, I hate this term, but it's called a comorbidity with dyslexia. It's almost exclusively like a thing. If you have dyslexia, like chances are you're going to have ADD. So I learned about it quite in depth in terms of working with children.
Right.
But never thought I had it myself.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
But it turns out I most definitely do. So yeah,
Okay.
it's funny how that kind of ends up being a thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Because my girlfriend always says that she has it, and so she gets really hyper fixated on like specific foods at a time and stuff. So that's why I asked, because she definitely has like that.
Yeah,
in her.
I'm a big foodie, so that's kind of my thing. Do you have like, are you a foodie? Is that a thing for you?
No.
No.
I have had the same lunch for the past 5 years. Like every day I have the same exact lunch every day. And it's not
now
like
we need to know, what is it? Like
it is 4 ounces of shredded chicken, 6 ounces of egg whites, and either I do change this. This is the one part of it that changes. It's either 4 ounces of white rice or a potato.
So this is gym diet.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. So I'm like a total like meathead gym bro a little bit. Yeah. Like I just competed in a strongman competition on this past Saturday.
How'd you do?
Horrible. Very disappointed with my performance, if I'm going to be honest. I tripped, and that trip costed me 3rd place. And
out of how many though?
There were 6 people in my class. So
that's top half. Got it.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. I mean, some of it I was happy with, some of it I wasn't. But like that. So funny enough, like reading is one of my hobbies, but it is not. Like I think for a lot of people who are in BookTube and everything, like reading is probably their number 1 hobby, right?
Sure.
Like for a lot of people. That's not me. Like like lifting weights and like that kind of stuff is my, like if I had to pick reading or like working out, I wouldn't do it, like not even a hesitation. It would be like working out and stuff.
For me, I'd be like, I'm good. I'm gonna pick books.
Yeah. And I mean, like I said, I love reading. It's one of my favorite things. It's just
it's a balance.
Like working out it's been my number 1 for like so long. Like at one point I was a certified personal trainer for a while. You caught me, you know. But yeah, certified personal trainer for a while, you know, have always been, you know, played football growing up, all that stuff that led into lifting, and you know, still do it now. So
it's so funny when you like, I think that's a really good point. We think of all of our BookTube people and we're like, oh, that this is your hobby. Like, you know,
right,
there's nothing else. And it's interesting because people do probably have more going on. We don't really know about it.
Right.
Yeah, I would say like writing for me is a big one, but also photography. Like those are my 2 big things. And food. But that's tangentially related to my job. So I'm like, well,
I think I've heard you say you have like a food blog, or
I do have a food blog, and I do the photography and editing and writing for all of that. So I mean, that's kind of
super cool.
It's a lot.
I'm sure.
Yeah, but Google right now is really determined to make sure that no one succeeds in blogging right now. They're like their algorithm thing right now is really, really strange, and no one quite knows what's going on.
The engine. I would be so curious to like have a real conversation with. I would love to sit down and have like a technical conversation with somebody from like YouTube or Google about how they act works. because they always lie and say that they don't know. Look, somebody, I mean, I'm sure that some of that is at like a technical level that I could not even begin to understand. I'm not an engineer at Google for that reason,
right?
But like I could have a technical enough conversation with them that like they could explain some stuff to me, and not even so like, not because I care about like making my video the most optimized, but I'm curious on like, this is the biggest search engine in the world. Like Google has more data probably than pretty much any other company that ever. You know, and so I would just love to see what kind of stuff they've got going on under the hood.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting just when you get into the nitty-gritty of SEO, which is something I had to learn. And like, I am not a tech person by any means. Like, I really struggle with tech. Like, my brain is wired for the humanities.
Sure.
So when I sit in front of a computer, I'm like, learn to type. Just it's one of those things that it takes me probably longer than it might the average person, but I do get there eventually. But SEO is just ever evolving and ever changing in a way that I don't understand. And the way that you target keywords is something that's changing and ever evolving. Like what Google and YouTube both choose to prioritize it. I mean, like more often than not, we see on YouTube, like inflammatory language will usually get bumped up, or if it's like a negative review or like a bashing of something, that usually jumps the queue and is going to be right there. Or like a top 10 is often there. And as we know, like the things that we like to talk about, usually often reviews, like they tank compared to other stuff, which if you don't really care about that stuff, it's fine. But if you are trying to optimize your channel in terms of peak algorithm performance, like good luck.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I don't understand it at all.
I don't even try to.
No.
It's not worth it, especially like at a hobby level, it's not. Like for people who are making a career out of it, like I can't imagine the kind of stress that they're dealing with. Like
it must be a lot
because it's a black box to you. Like you have your best guesses, and I'm sure there are people who like their whole job is they probably study YouTube and then sell that information to YouTubers. I'm sure that's a thing.
Oh, definitely.
Having to deal with that, I mean that sounds miserable.
Horrible. Not for me.
Yeah.
Not for me. But what motivated you to start your channel? I'm not sure I actually know that story.
Yeah, so it was originally, part of it was I would get done reading something, and then I wouldn't really like write a review for it on Goodreads, and then I would look back 6 months or a year later and be like, I don't remember everything that I would like to about that book. And so that was like kind of the first like almost like a diary for it. And then I watched a lot of BookTube content beforehand. And so like I just really enjoyed it and I thought it was fun. And so like, and at the time when I started, I really enjoyed watching reviews. And so that's kind of was like, they just kind of melded together so well to like, okay, well, I can always go back and listen to my own review if I want to remember some stuff. And so that was kind of like the perfect thing. And I have noticed that as I have made more videos, what I like to watch has changed. And so that almost makes me kind of want to change what I'm making, because like that's kind of the whole premise is I'm doing what I kind of like to watch anyways. So I've thought of not doing just straight reviews anymore. And I know you've done some of the vlogs. I really enjoy watching those. And so part of me is like, should I try those? Like, would I like making it as much as I like watching it? Because it is what I like to watch. And another part of it is I don't always have enough to say about certain books that I feel like, justifies me doing a whole
sitting
review
down
for
to
it.
do a whole video. I get that completely. The thing I like about the vlogs is there's no having to like set everything up. It's just you pull out your camera and you're like, immediate reaction here. I mean, if you're doing a spoiler one versus a non-spoiler one, obviously you kind of approach it differently, but I like it just being a bit more casual. That to me is nice. And you can do both, which is great. Like you can do a non-spoiler one and a spoiler one, but I think it's a fun way to get to know people a little bit more, because it just feels somewhat more immersive maybe.
Yeah.
And I have found with some of them, I like going back to my spoiler one specifically, and I'm like, oh, that's how I reacted to when I read that. Or like, did I like that? I didn't like that. Because you forget when you read so many books, you're like, oh yeah.
It's hard to remember every single thing and how you felt in like that exact moment. And so, I've been toying with that idea a little bit. And then
I think you should do it.
Yeah, I'm kind of doing one for Memories of Ice because when I finished Dead House Gates, I was like, there's no reason to continue to talk about these in a not like we're in book 3 of a series that like 3 books in is longer than most series. Like nobody, like if you're coming to watch a spoiler-free review,
you know what's happening.
I mean, more power to you if you are, but that just doesn't seem. And so like, and it also was getting to the point where it's like, I don't know how to talk about this book without just spoilers. So I'm kind of doing one for Memories of Ice, which is nice because I'll read a section of it and be like, if I don't say exactly what I'm thinking right now, I'm not going to remember in a week because it's too much happening.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah,
I get that completely. Yeah, I completely get that. I am terrible at non-spoiler reviews. Like it's something that I've been trying to work on with the non-spoiler vlogs, honestly, just learning how to talk about books in a way that doesn't give away everything, because I get this is the hyperfixation. I get fixated on certain aspects of a book or certain moments in a book that I'm like, gotta talk about them. And I'm like, well, we can't talk about them if you haven't read the book.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. I don't want to spoil things for people, but like certain things, I agree with you. If it's like a book for, like I did a review for Iron Gold when I read it, and I was like, we're going to be talking spoilers here, guys. Yeah. Like if but simultaneously it's like a book one again, because it's like a restarting
of that series. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's good, but
the spoiler things I think sometimes I'm so careful with it. I don't even like do a good enough job like at all, because I'm so afraid of spoiling even like the smallest sometimes I'll even be afraid to say characters' names because they'll show up a little bit later into the book than I think I should say. Yeah. And so there have been times where I'm like in the middle of doing a review and I stop and I'm like, everything you just said, like it would be better or it'll either be I can't use it, or it'll be you should have just said something different, because it's not actually a spoiler. You're just being too careful, which is kind of it's like an interesting balancing act. For sure.
I hear you. I've had a few of those where people have called me out in my comments. They're like, you probably should have labeled that as spoilers. I'm like, yeah. My bad. Like I usually get caught in that in a top 10 where I mention someone and I'm like,
yeah. Well, I did a top 10 of the Wheel of Time, like moments of the Wheel of Time at one point. And I was like, obviously I was like, this is a spoiler, but like sometimes in the certain series and books, it's like the stuff I want to talk about is like such a massive spoiler. It's like you have to, I'm sorry, you've had to have read up to book 10 of 15
to understand this.
Yeah, it's red levels of spoilers.
So I know Wheel of Time is your favorite series. What is your favorite book in the Wheel of Time series?
The Gathering Storm. I think that's book 12. And I think it's the first one that Sanderson wrote.
Yes, it is book 12, and it is the first one that Sanderson wrote.
It's the first one that Sanderson wrote.
Yeah.
Not only is that my favorite book, that book probably has my favorite moment in all of like fantasy and.
Oh, really?
Like, yeah, there's a moment in that book that the only thing that comes close is there's something that happens in the last book of the Three Body Problem, Death's End. Like those are the two moments that like
stick out.
I think about them like more than that's reasonable. Like just I'll be like randomly walking through a grocery store and just be like, yeah, like.
I have a few moments like that, but usually they're comedic moments in books because I love humor in fantasy. Like I love it, which is why Abercrombie really works for me. Why Pratchett and Gaiman will work for me, because it's like that subtle dark humor occasionally. And I will just audibly laugh thinking about some of the stuff that Abercrombie's written, like out of nowhere, because I'm just like phenomenal.
Yeah, so the both of the moments that I'm thinking of are like super dramatic and like all the stakes, high tension, like super super high impact on like the series and everything as a whole. Oh, hello, Kitty.
He's been howling in the background. I'm sure people have heard him.
And yeah, so those are the kind of moments. And then the next couple are from Stormlight, are the next couple that probably stick out.
I remember when you were ahead of me with Oathbringer. And yes, Murray, it's Murray. And you had posted, or you put in the video breakdown, you were like, there is this one chapter in Oathbringer that was absolutely incredible. And you named the chapter. And I remember I got to this chapter and I was like, this is so, like, this can't be what Tom is talking about. Like, this is the most basic thing. What? And then I messaged you and I was like, oh, it's the wrong chapter.
yeah, I remember that. Yeah, that moment. And then obviously I think most people know the one from Words of Radiance that pretty much everybody does. But yeah, there's one other one. And so, yeah, but with that Wheel of Time moment, it sticks it sticks out in my head. Sometimes I'll go back and reread it. Like there have been times where we'll be in a bookstore and I'll see it and I'll be like, sorry, I just need like a minute
here.
and I'll go and reread that. Like it's like not even a whole chapter. It's just like a couple pages of the chapter that I'll read, and just it's just that special. So
that's awesome. I love that you have that with Wheel of Time. Also, just commendable that it's 12 books into a series that is your favorite book.
yeah. I know a lot of people have a lot of love for the last book because it is pretty impressive how it ends, and like it's such a monumental task to do it. But yeah, book 12 for me was peak.
That's
moment.
Awesome. I love that.
Yeah, well, and that's the same with The Expanse too. Book 8 of The Expanse is one of my favorite books of all time. I think it's number 2 still.
Wow, I haven't read Expanse yet, but it's also on the list of book club books. So,
okay, awesome.
It's potentially coming. Josh has read all of them and loves the series. So
yeah,
I have not, but hoping to in the next while.
That's a funny series for me. The first couple books, like I liked them. I thought they were fine, and it wasn't until the last 3 books of that series to me are like it's not even close. They make reading those last 3 books make the rest of the books worth reading just to get to them. That's how I feel about it, and I think that's also what makes me so excited for their new book that's coming. Because it really felt like they started to hit their stride together as writers. Near the end, and so the fact that they're going to have another one coming makes me think that maybe they can have that same magic still.
Hopefully, I mean that'll be exciting if that's the case. It'll be interesting. You'll have to let me know when you read it.
That'll be hopefully a day 1 read. I have some long trips that I have planned that I don't think I'm going to be able to read a whole lot on, and so
Maybe that'll be Josh's Christmas gift this year. One of those will be
one
of his gifts will be that most likely. But all right, tell the good people where they can find you, Mr. Tom Orange.
It's just Tom Orange on YouTube.
And you also have Instagram. Tell them where they can find all your data.
All of my fun stats that I just post every week. I think it's just Tom Orange on Instagram too.
Just look for bright orange guys.
It'll be.
As always, everyone, thank you so much for joining us. I love the love bomb chats just so I get to know people a little bit better. We can talk about what we love, and I love and appreciate everyone showing up in the comments. As always, if you want to help support the channel, you can hit like and subscribe, leave a comment down below to let us know what you've been loving and reading. Also, the channel now has a Patreon. If you would like to jump over there and help support the channel, that is going to be a big thing for our book club and our Song of Ice and Fire reread and rewatch, if that is something that you are interested in doing. The book club chat will be a week from today, I believe, the 28th, whenever the 28th is going to be. So that's when it's going to be. But thanks for coming and chatting with me, Tom. It was good to talk to you again.
Yeah, it was good to talk to you again.
All right. Have a good night, everybody. And if you're catching us on a rewatch, let us know what you've been reading. See you next time. Bye.